Hello and welcome to episode 386 of the Money to the Masses podcast without your resident expert, as always, Damien Fay, and just me, Andy Leeks. So a slightly different podcast this week. Unfortunately, Damien has lost his voice, got a bit of a cold. He's absolutely fine. He's a trooper. He's getting through the work, getting through the week, but he just unfortunately can't be part of the podcast this week. He will be back next week, I'm sure, but the show must go on and it's left for me to hold the reins this week. So what we'll be doing is a bit of a team takeover this week, and we'll be inviting Harvey and Lauren onto the show, and we'll be explaining exactly what's coming up on this week's show in just a second. Before we get on with this week's podcast, let's just start quickly with a tiny bit of admin, and we mentioned it last week. I'll mention it again. Damien will be appearing on a panel event on how you can plan for a happy retirement that also ties in with the cost of living, and that's being hosted by Pension Bee. It's on the 26th of October at 18 Finsbury Square in London. So do sign up to that if you're interested. You can go along and say hello to Damien, I'm sure, and he'll be happy to chat and say hi. And the final piece of admin this week is to read out a wonderful review that we got from Dean. And it goes on to say, firstly, I would like to thank Damien and Andy for such brilliant content. The ability to break down topics for the listener to understand and follow is a skill you've both mastered. Each show is very current, ranging from consumer affairs to investing. I've developed a passion for my finances and investing for my retirement, and this podcast has been a big part of my learning success. I have recommended and will continue to do so for anyone wanting to get ahead and improve their finances and understanding. So Dean, you know who you are. If you could please get in touch with Lauren at moneytothemasses.com and claim your Money to the Masses mug with your address and details, and we'll be happy to send that out to you. If you yourself would like to receive a Money to the Masses mug, one of the best ways to do it is to leave us a glowing review on your podcast app of choice. And again, feel free to let us know once you've done that by email, Lauren at moneytothemasses.com, and we'll be glad to read it out on the show. So on with this week's show then. We're going to start with Harvey, who will be doing an insurance piece that looks at the types of products available if you have a baby or are thinking of having one. Lauren will then be joining us to do a piece on home appliances and the cost of running them, going through the average cost of running popular household items and some tips on how to reduce the cost. And finally, I'll be doing a piece on social broadband tariffs, explaining exactly what they are and who can take advantage of them. Okay, so let's bring Harvey onto the show then. We're going to start with you, Harvey, and this piece really came about from a conversation that happened across the office. Lauren was scrolling through her social media, I think it was TikTok, and she saw this thing that was being mentioned by a few TikTokers, and they were saying baby insurance and calling it that as a specific product. And quite rightly, your ears pricked up, Harvey, and you're able to answer some of those questions. So we thought we'd bring it to the podcast. So Harvey, welcome to the show. Baby insurance then. What's this all about?
Hi, Andy. Yes, thanks for having me back. Yeah, it was quite an unusual start of a conversation, but quite interesting where we ended up. So glad we're talking about it on the podcast, because I think that our listeners will probably benefit from some of the information that we shared in the office. So yeah, baby insurance isn't really a thing. So if you go off and Google it, you won't find it. It's not a product. It's not something you can buy, but it's a way that people are describing some of the options that exist within personal insurance policies that can help people who either are expecting a baby or have babies, have children, and people that depend on them. So we can talk a little bit about those options and how they help people.
So what kind of personal insurance products are we talking about? What can help people who are looking or thinking about insurance for babies or children?
The kinds of policies that we're looking at really, Andy, are critical illness cover, income protection and health insurance. Largely, the piece of media that Lauren saw was one that was talking about the critical illness options. So we can probably start there. Critical illness cover, if you've come across it before, is an insurance policy that protects people if they're diagnosed with one of a number of serious illnesses. It's a fairly complex product and it's not the same across the market. So it does vary in terms of its quality. But largely within critical illness cover, as well as adult cover, you get children's cover, and children's cover can pay out for children who are diagnosed with a serious illness. And that extends to children who have not been born yet. So this didn't used to be a thing. And insurance companies largely covered children from when they were about 30 days old. But now you find more and more that insurance companies are covering babies who are still in their mummy's bellies. So they're still in gestation. And if something unfortunately were to go wrong or an illness were to be detected, some things like Down syndrome, spina bifida, these kinds of conditions can result in a financial payout for that parent.
Okay, so when I was overhearing in the office, Lauren was talking about having seen the video on TikTok. The video seemed to be very focused on pregnancy, if you like. So how can a critical illness policy help someone who's perhaps pregnant?
I mean, one of the things that we should probably say is that you have to have this covered in place before a certain number of weeks of pregnancy, and that might vary depending on where you look for this kind of cover. But largely, what the policies can include sometimes is something called pregnancy cover, and pregnancy cover will provide a payout if something were to go wrong. So if there was an ectopic pregnancy, or you perhaps lost the baby after a certain number of weeks of gestation, then these kinds of policies have options within them that will pay out a small sum of money so that that person has means to move forward.
Okay, so you mentioned some other products there, income protection, health insurance. Let's look at income protection next then. How can that help?
So income protection is more of a product that would help you once you have your child. So when we have little children, and for any of our listeners who have small children, you'll know that looking after sick children is part of being a parent. You know, we all do it. We've had to take time off work to care for little ones. But when those problems are a little bit more serious and you perhaps have to take more time off work than just a few days, then that could have a knock-on effect to your finances. Income protection, in some cases, not all, can provide carer benefit. So although you're fit and well and you can go to work, because you're looking after somebody who depends on you, the policy will start paying you a monthly benefit so that you can replace your income, keep your bills going, and take that time out to care for somebody without the worry of losing your monthly income.
So again, is that a type of policy that you would need to have taken out before you have your child, or does that not matter?
Generally, it doesn't matter. So if you've got a child and then you buy income protection, as long as the actual illness itself, the problem that's occurred, happens after you've taken your policy out, then you should be covered. But remember, you've always got to look at the terms and conditions of these policies and where they might pay out and where they might have some restrictions.
Okay, moving on to the other product you mentioned then, health insurance. How can that help?
I mean, health insurance will help a baby just the same way as it will help an adult. Health insurance exists to give you access to private medical treatment, diagnosis, care for those people who perhaps don't want to pay the outlay for private treatment. A private medical insurance can provide you with that access if you so need it. And I think that within the office, some of us actually have private medical insurance more because we want it for our children than we want it for ourselves. I think we'd be happy waiting to see somebody on the NHS, but largely people are not so happy when it's their child and they're having to wait for important treatment. So private medical insurance can be useful for parents who are worried about especially the current situation with the NHS, where you perhaps can't get a GP appointment, you can't get initial diagnosis of a condition and then treatment as well. So private health insurance will help any children that you have, but they have to be named on the policy in order to access that.
And is that the same as other policies that we've mentioned in terms of existing conditions? I'm assuming that, again, you'd need to take that policy out prior to any conditions occurring.
Absolutely, Andy. It's almost a caveat that we could apply to most personal insurances, is that if something is already existing, then generally the insurance company will have asked you about it. They'll usually have a clause within your policy that says that that particular condition is excluded from any claims that you might make. And sometimes you can be covered for things that happened historically, but you're so far away from them that now the insurance company is happy to cover you for them if they were to happen again. So those are things that are assessed on an individual basis, and you should speak to somebody really if you do have health problems from the past that you wish to be covered, because you may be directed to providers who are a little bit better at covering historical medical problems than perhaps others are.
Great. So there's a bit of silver lining there. The light at the end of the tunnel is don't give up hope. There is a chance that you will be covered for existing conditions, but it's done on a case-by-case basis, product-by-product basis. Speak to an expert. And we'll explain how you can do that actually via Harvey's article, which is a brilliant article all about this subject, which will be in the show notes, and we'll link to that as well on the article on the website. So let's finish off this piece then, Harvey. Let's just quickly summarize what we've spoken about there on exactly who these types of policies could benefit. Can you just give us like a summary?
Absolutely, Andy. So any parent or anyone who cares for a child, a dependent, whether it's your own child, naturally adopted, a stepchild, or a child that you're financially responsible for, these descriptions for children that can be covered have been extended over recent years. So they do include much more than people perhaps expect them to. So if a child depends on you, then they can be covered by one of these policies, and you should probably look at them. I think the parents who are caring for children largely don't want to think about things going wrong, but things do go wrong from time to time. And in those situations, having some amount of money that's paid out through this kind of policy can be a lifeline to just taking time away from work, allowing yourself the space to perhaps deal with the problem that's in front of you, rather than having to worry about money and the emotional turmoil that you're going through with a child who's poorly.
Okay, so thanks ever so much for doing that, Harvey. You've written a brilliant piece, which we've put onto the website. We'll link to it in the show notes. And that covers things that we haven't been able to go into detail in the podcast. And it talks about what you need to look out for. Things like the different tiers of cover, how old your product is if you've already bought one, the providers, the types of cover that the providers offer in terms of how comprehensive it is. So it can be a little complex. So we would recommend go and read the article that Harvey's done. And there is information in the article as to who you can speak to in order to get independent, tailored advice. They'll be able to look at the products that you've currently got, the products that you need, look at your current situation and circumstances and budget, and provide a solution that is tailored to your needs. So Harvey, thanks ever so much for coming on. Okay, so Lauren, let's bring you onto the show then. And as we mentioned earlier in the podcast, you're going to be doing a piece on home appliances and the cost of running those. And some of this data is quite surprising, but the takeaway that we hope people will be able to get from this is where they can save money and actually just being a bit more aware of the cost of running certain devices and for how long. So Lauren, energy and running appliances, what have we got?
Yes, so we've heard a lot about energy and the price of energy and the rise in energy bills in the news for the past few months and for the majority of 2022, really. So I wrote an article to have a look at how much it costs for us to use our electricity, our appliances and our gas and everything at home, and how much it's going to cost us, to see what we can do to try and cut back on the things that we use. So with the new energy price guarantee, the intervention from the government that came in after Ofgem announced their price cap, means that the average charge for a household per kilowatt is 34p for electricity and 10.3p for gas. So when you are charged for your electricity or gas, you are charged per unit that you use. So when they say that there will be an average bill or a cap on the amount that you use, it doesn't cap the amount that you can pay. That varies depending on how much you use, but it caps the amount that providers can charge you per unit of gas and electricity that you use. So based on these prices, so the 34p per kilowatt for electricity, I have had a look at how much it costs you to use certain appliances around your home. And I've broken them down in my article to different areas of your home, such as your kitchen, your bedroom, your bathroom, just so we can get a rough idea of how much it costs for us to cook a meal or to wash, for example.
So that's great. What we're talking about here then is real-time prices, what these appliances are actually going to cost you using the new prices and the government intervention, everything all rolled into one based on kilowatts per hour. Obviously, if you've got a smart meter at home, then you're probably used to seeing on that smart meter that going up and down based on your household's usage of certain things. But this piece gives you an actual monetary value per appliance for the amount of time that you're using it. So it's just something that you can think to yourself, right, I might need to stop using that, or I might need to bring down the usage of this or that item. So Lauren, which room are we starting with?
Yeah, so I'm going to take a look at the kitchen first. That's probably the most used room in your home, apart from obviously your bedroom when you're sleeping. Now, one thing that I should mention before we go into the cost of these appliances is it will vary depending on your home, the size of your home, how many appliances you have, and then the energy efficiency of your appliance. Now, when you buy electrical appliances, you will notice that they do have a little sticker on them that tells you the efficiency of the appliance. Now, A is normally great, that is really energy efficient, and G isn't so great, and that one is likely to cost you more to run the appliance. So usually the more energy efficient your appliance, the more expensive it is to buy, but in the long term it would save you a bit more money because it doesn't cost as much to run the appliance. So just bear that in mind when I am going through the cost to use different appliances, because it can vary slightly depending on those different factors. So in my article, I had a look at an air fryer, for example. I've seen quite a lot recently in these different Facebook groups about saving money, but people are trying to switch over to an air fryer and use an air fryer more than they are an oven. And that's because it can be more cost effective. And one of the main reasons for this is because it would take half the amount of cooking time. For example, if you're going to cook oven chips, it would normally take about 30 minutes to get a decent crispy oven chip. Whereas if you do it in the air fryer, it could take about 15 minutes. So I've done a cost comparison for an air fryer. It's 30 minutes here. The average daily cost for an air fryer, so using it for 30 minutes to cook your meal, would be 32p. Now, if you compare this to using an oven for an hour, for example, to cook a meal, that is an average of 71 pence per hour. So obviously it can be more or less depending on how long the oven is on for. I've also done a comparison here for a slow cooker. So if you have the slow cooker on for 8 hours, that can cost you 38p a day. Now, in these cost comparisons, I've also included the monthly and annual cost of these. So obviously, over time, this will build up. If you use your oven for an hour a day, every day, over the year, this will cost you, on average, around £260.61. Now, if we compare this back to the air fryer, that is £117.90 if you use your air fryer for 30 minutes every day. And then if you look at your slow cooker cost, if you use that for 8 hours every day throughout the year, that will cost you, on average, £138.99. So just quickly, before I move on to a different room, some of you may be thinking, well, I don't actually have an electric oven. I have a gas oven, or you have a gas hob. So how much is it going to cost you to use gas appliances in your home? So at the moment, gas is actually cheaper than electricity per unit that you use. So gas is on an average 10.3p per unit compared to 34p per unit of electricity. So although you will use more units of gas when cooking using your gas appliances, it doesn't necessarily mean it will be more expensive to use them because it is cheaper per unit of energy. Now, a couple of other appliances that we can look at in the kitchen are things that you'd use to wash, for example, so your washing machine and your tumble dryer. Now, tumble dryers have a really bad rep. People say if you want to save money, don't use your tumble dryer, and that is because it can be quite costly. So 30 minutes using the average tumble dryer will cost you around 43 pence for every 30 minutes. So over the course of a year, that can cost you around £155.13. Now, this is based on the average tumble dryer and the average energy efficiency. But if you do have one, and I know I have one that is less energy efficient than this because I bought a cheap one when I moved into my house, so it will cost me more than that to use my appliance. So this is something that if you're wondering exactly how much it's going to cost you to use your appliance, you can look at the average amount of energy that your appliance uses, and you can go onto these online calculators and calculate how much it will cost you based on your appliance to use it for a certain amount of time per day.
And you've linked to one of those calculators in the article that you've written, haven't you? So if people would like to check out all those costs that you've just mentioned in the kitchen, because there are quite a few numbers there that we've mentioned, and also skip over to that calculator to look at certain appliances and what the actual cost is for them, they can do that all via the article, right?
Yeah, exactly. All of the information that you need is in my article over on the Money to Masses website. So you can go off and find out all of that information based on your own appliances and your own usage.
Okay, so there's the main room that a lot of us use most of our energy. Let's cover a few other rooms then and a few of the most popular appliances that we tend to use.
Yeah, so moving on to the TV now. Many of us watch our TV most days, and my comparison in this article is if you watched your TV for around 3 hours a day. So your daily cost if you watch your TV for 3 hours a day is about 15 pence for 3 hours. And if you combine this cost over a period of a year, watching your TV for 3 hours every day, it will cost you on average around £55.84. Now, this is just for the TV. This doesn't actually include the cost of your TV box, such as your Sky or your Virgin. So if you have that on at the same time as watching your TV for 3 hours, that will cost you 4p for 3 hours. And over the course of the year, that will be £13.03. So that's something to consider, that you don't just have to consider the cost of the TV, it's also everything that goes along with the TV as well.
And I'm a bit of an unusual case with that one, Lauren, because I was one of the first adopters of Sky Glass, which is one of those newfangled tellies that pulls it all into one. And one of their unique selling points, actually, I remember in their marketing material, is that it was an efficient way of watching telly because you haven't got a separate top box. So I haven't seen the numbers on that, but I imagine it's somewhere in the region of what you said, just a little bit less because it combines the two. What have we got next? What appliance are we looking at?
So another one I looked at was a games console. If you have a bit of downtime at the end of the day and you want to sit and play your PlayStation or your Xbox, say you use it for an hour, that's going to cost you around 5p per day. But if you take that cost in consideration over the year, that'll be about £18.62. Obviously, that can increase or decrease depending on the appliance you have and how long that you play it for.
And so now we've given you the numbers there. Listeners can actually, if they've got children that tend to use a PlayStation or Xbox a lot, use those numbers and start taking that out of their pocket money. You have our permission.
And one thing that I thought was quite interesting that I looked at as well is the cost of using a PC or a desktop computer. Now, a lot of us are obviously working from home now. So if you do have a PC or a desktop computer and you use it for 8 hours a day every day, that's going to cost you on average around 54 pence a day. But where it gets interesting is if you consider that cost over the course of a year. Now, this is obviously if you work every single day for 8 hours a day. Obviously, it's not going to be quite as much as this because you will have days off in between, but it'll be on average of £198.56 a year, which is, I thought, was quite interesting and was a bit higher than I was expecting, really. So it's quite interesting to think that if you do have a laptop, obviously, if you charge your laptop, it will cost you. But once you unplug it and you could sit without it plugged in, that could save you a bit of money throughout the year.
So that's a really good tip. It's something that I don't do. I leave my laptop plugged in all the time. That's a really good tip. I actually don't do that myself, so I must think to do that more often. So while we're on these money tips, is there anything else that people can do to save some money on their energy bills?
Yeah, so I'm going to share some energy saving tips with you now. Now, I must mention there is a website out there called the Energy Saving Trust, and they share some really great money saving tips for you on your energy bills, your water bills, your utility bills. So go and check them out as well for some additional money saving tips. And I'm just going to share a couple of them with you today. So one of the articles that we've written on the Money to Masses website is about the cost of leaving your devices on standby, and it can actually cost you an average of around £147 a year according to British Gas if you do leave your devices on standby. So if you wanted to save some money, one thing you could do is go around and switch these devices off of standby. Now, obviously, the idea of walking around your house switching off every single plug before you go to bed does seem quite tedious. So there is something that you can do, and you can get a standby saver plug. So that means you plug your device into this and then you push a button on a remote that you have, which will turn it off for you. But one thing I did think about these is I did have a look to see how much these plugs cost, and you can get 4 for around £28. But according to the Energy Saving Trust, you could save around £65 a year if you do turn your devices off of standby. But if you work out how many plugs you have and how many devices you want to turn off, it could become quite costly in terms of buying those plugs. So one thing you could consider is buying a standby saver plug for a device that you can't necessarily reach, and then going around and manually switching off all of the other devices that you can reach before bed. Another money saving tip that you can have is to draft proof your home. So you can draft proof your windows, your doors, if you have a fireplace, your chimney, and doing all of those things can help to save you on average £125 a year. Now, these savings from the Energy Saving Trust are based on the current unit gas and electricity prices, but offer a typical 3-bedroom gas heated home in England, Scotland and Wales, and they are based on a typical 3-bedroom semi-detached home in Northern Ireland. So obviously the savings may be more or less depending on your property. But if you do decide to draft proof your home, this is something that I know I really need to do because the windows in my house aren't that great. You can pick up things like self-adhesive strips, and I had a look, these cost around £12 for 5 metres, and you can go around your home and try and draft proof your windows, so that could save you a bit of money each each year. One of the most common energy saving tips, and everyone tells you to do this, is to replace the bulbs in your home with LED light bulb. Now, in my article, I actually had a look at the cost of LED lights. And if you have an LED light on for 2 hours, it costs you less than a penny. Now, the monthly cost of having an LED light on for 2 hours a day is 10 pence. So it does really show you that having an LED light does save you money. So that is worth replacing all of the light bulbs in your home. Another tip is when you are washing, wash on a 30-degree cycle and try to do one less wash a week. And making sure also that your washing machine and your dishwashers are full before putting the load on. Rather than putting a load on that's half empty, you're using the same amount of water and energy. So you might as well fill it up to the top so that you don't have to do twice as many loads. But just finally, I wanted to finish on showering. So everyone says to you that you need to reduce your shower, bath less and everything like that. But it was quite interesting when I was doing the cost comparison about the difference between how long you're in a shower. So if you have a 10-minute shower a day, now this isn't just you, obviously you can consider if there's 4 people in your home and the amount of times all of you have a shower in a day equates to 10 minutes, it will cost you 51 pence a day for your electric shower. So over the course of a month, that'll be £15.30, and over the course of a year, that's £186.15 on average. But if all of you have slightly longer showers and your electric shower is on for around 30 minutes a day every day, that goes up to £1.53 a day on average, £45.90 a month on average, and over the course of a year that is around £558.45. Now that's quite a significant jump, and when I saw that, that made me think I'm quite guilty every now and then, particularly on a really cold day, to stand in the shower while I warm up. But now I definitely won't be doing that when I realise how much it actually costs and the difference in the cost for having a longer shower. So not even are you wasting water, but you're also costing yourself a lot more in electricity.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And my shower system runs on the combi boiler, so it's heated by gas, but I'm still using those figures and extrapolating the fact that the longer you're using your shower, the more it's going to cost you. And actually, I'm thinking to myself, I might get some of those, restaurants have those timers to be able to cook the different elements of the food. I'm thinking of sticking a couple of those timers in the shower and setting them to like 3 or 5 or 8 minutes just to make sure that my children hurry themselves up. Maybe I'm being too much of a miser, but I reckon that could work.
You should put egg timers in the shower, but don't tell them, put it under a towel and give them the fright of their life when it goes off.
Yeah. Okay, so let's wrap this piece up then, Lauren, and you're going to go through just really quickly the help that's available for people if they are really struggling.
Yeah, so I can't stress enough, if you are struggling to manage the cost of your energy bills, contact your supplier. They are obliged to help you. They have to help you, and they have to accommodate you an affordable payment plan. So don't bury your head in the sand and not pay your bills or panic. Just give them a ring and explain the situation and agree an affordable payment plan that works for you. There's also a host of debt charities out there that can offer free debt advice. We have a list of those on the Money to the Masses website. And also earlier in 2022, the government announced a cost of living support package. So there's a bunch of support in there. I summarise all of the support that was announced over on the Money to the Masses website in my article. But there's also a number of grants and schemes that are available. So be sure to go and check our articles out on the Money to the Masses website, where it explains all of that information for you.
Okay, so on to the final piece of the podcast then, and I'd like to talk briefly about social broadband tariffs. And the reason we're bringing it up on the podcast this week is really to create some awareness, because Ofcom produced some stats and figures this week that said providers of these tariffs should be doing more to help those households that are struggling to afford their household bills. So it's worth explaining what a social broadband tariff is. It's a discounted broadband tariff that households can apply for if they are on certain benefits, and those tariffs can save families up to £144 a year. So if you receive benefits such as universal credit, pension credit, income support, job seekers allowance or care leavers support, there is every chance that you'll be able to receive a social broadband tariff which will significantly reduce the cost of providing internet to your household. And the stats this week were pretty shocking. Only 136,000 social broadband tariffs are in existence at the moment, and Ofcom says that that is only 3.2% of those that are eligible. Now there's obvious reasons as to why that is. Some of it can be attributed to the fact that people dismiss those tariffs because they think that the product may be slightly inferior. Perhaps they think there'll be service interruptions or the speed won't be up to scratch. For some people, it may be the stigma of applying for and going through the process of going on to one of these tariffs. Another stumbling block and reasons why people might not be taking out these social tariffs is because they are worried about disconnection and perhaps any associated costs from switching and any early termination charges. But the good news is a great deal of these social tariffs do not come with any setup fees, certainly significantly reduced fees if there are any fees. And also the early termination charges are not normally applied to these tariffs and people can easily switch in and switch out of them without charge. But the major reason that people aren't taking out these tariffs is the fact that they don't know that they exist. In fact, Ofcom found that 7 out of 10 consumers who are eligible for a broadband social tariff didn't even know it existed. So therein lies the problem and part of the reason why we wanted to bring it to light on the podcast this week. So to give you an example of some of the providers that offer these social broadband tariffs, as well as the contract lengths and the average speed and the cost of these tariffs, I'm going to quickly read through just a few of the top providers. BT Home Essentials is a product that costs £15 a month, is a 12-month contract length and will provide average broadband speeds of 36 megabytes per second. Now, if you compare that to the same 36 megabyte per second deal that's available for a 12-month contract on a standard contract, BT are charging around about £38 a month. So there is a significant saving there, £38 compared to £15 on the social tariff for effectively the same product. Another provider is Now Broadband. They offer a basics tariff that costs £20 per month. And again, that will offer speeds of 36 megabytes per second. And that is on a 31-day rolling contract. So again, you don't need to tie yourself into particularly long contracts on these social tariffs. And that's part of the appeal. And finally, another one of the big providers, let's look at Virgin Media Essential Broadband. Their social tariff is £15 per month. It's on a 30-day rolling contract. Again, lots of flexibility there. Slightly lower speeds though on that package, 15 megabytes per second. I think it's worth at this point just naming and shaming some of those providers that haven't, at the time of recording, as yet come up with a social tariff for their customers. And I'm more than happy to name these. Ofcom have been very vocal about it as well. So those providers are TalkTalk, Shell, EE, PlusNet, Vodafone, O2 and 3. None of those yet have social tariffs available for their customers, which is particularly disappointing, and I really hope that they offer a social tariff sometime in the near future. So even if you don't qualify for a social broadband tariff, please do bear it in mind if you know someone that is struggling that may benefit from applying for and switching over to a social broadband tariff, because let's be honest, a broadband bill is pretty much an essential bill these days in order to keep people connected. Do let them know that these things exist and spread the word. And we have written more details about this and how you can apply for such packages on an article we've written on the Money to the Masses website, and we'll link to it again in the show notes. So that's it. We're done for this week. Please do feel free to review the podcast in the usual ways that we've mentioned before. We'd love to be able to read it out on the podcast, and of course you could win yourself a Money to the Masses mug. If you want to give your well wishes to Damien, feel free to do so, or any feedback or suggestions for future shows, it's damien@moneytothemasses.com. My email address is andy@moneytothemasses.com. Do get in touch. And of course, it's always nice to see new people on the Money to the Masses community group. Go to facebook.com/groups/Money to the Masses. And so all that's left for me to say this week is until next time.